Resident Evil is technically a series about zombies, mutants, and the occasional invincible Spanish villager throwing a sickle at your head. But what the franchise is actually about, when you look at 30 years of plot, is the rug being pulled out from under you. Every other entry includes some moment where a friend turns out to be a spy, a mentor turns out to be a monster, or the woman knitting in the rocking chair turns out to be a bioweapon. The lore is essentially a stack of revelations balanced on top of more revelations, and Capcom has gotten very, very good at making sure none of it is what it looks like. Here are the 10 most franchise-shaking twists in Resident Evil history, ranked by how hard each one detonated the universe around it, starting with personal betrayals and ending with the reveal that quietly rewrote 30 years of canon. Ada Wong is a corporate spy. You spend most of Resident Evil 2 thinking Ada Wong is a journalist tracking down her missing boyfriend John, a researcher who supposedly disappeared during the Raccoon City outbreak. She is mysterious, she is competent, she handles a pistol better than any non-cop civilian has any right to, and there is a small, growing romantic thing between her and Leon S. Kennedy that the game keeps quietly leaning into. The whole framing is regular woman in over her head. Then a phone call goes off and the entire performance falls apart. Ada is not a journalist. There is no missing boyfriend. The grieving girlfriend routine was a cover story, and the woman Leon has been bleeding for is a corporate spy sent into Raccoon City to extract a sample of the G virus from William Birkin's body for a rival of Umbrella. Every soft moment between them was a tactical resource Ada was managing, while she got closer to the prize. The lore ripple here is significant, because Ada becomes the first major character in the franchise to operate outside the Umbrella vs. Survivors binary. Up until that phone call, everyone in Resident Evil is either an Umbrella employee, an Umbrella victim, or someone trying to stop Umbrella. Ada introduces a third category: rival corporations, professional industrial espionage, a whole shadow market where the viruses are products and survivors are collateral. She becomes the bridge to that world for the rest of the franchise. The psychological shock lands hardest in the moment. Ada takes the bullet meant for Leon and seemingly dies in his arms, because by that point, you have already learned she has been lying to him the entire game, and you cannot tell whether the sacrifice is real loyalty finally surfacing or one last extraction trick. Leon does not get to know either. He spends the next 20 years still in love with a woman whose actual name and employer he has never been told. Mia Winters is an operative for the Connections. Resident Evil 7 sells you a domestic horror story. Your wife Mia disappears 3 years ago. You get a video message telling you she is alive at a creepy plantation in Louisiana, and you drive out there as a regular guy trying to rescue a regular woman from whatever swamp cult has taken her. The first hour of the game is paced like a found footage movie about a husband walking into a haunted house with absolutely no business being there. You are an everyman. Mia is the victim. The Bakers are the monsters. Then you find Mia's recorded confession, and the whole framing inverts. Mia was never a babysitter, and the trip on the tanker was never a normal job. She was an operative for the Connections, a bioweapons trafficking organization, and her actual assignment was the secure transport of Eveline, the engineered bioweapon at the center of the entire game. The reason your wife disappeared for 3 years is that her ship crashed while she was hauling a living biological weapon as cargo, and the reason the Bakers are monsters is because Mia's containment failed and Eveline got out. The lore ripple introduces the Connections as a successor to Umbrella's bioweapons trafficking Shadow, a privatized post-Umbrella ecosystem where the science kept moving even after the corporation collapsed. It also recasts Ethan from innocent husband to man, married to a woman whose actual job is biological weapons logistics, a dynamic the rest of the saga never fully resolves. The shockwave for Ethan is layered with horror, because by the time he learns who Mia really is, he has already been infected, mutated, and partially possessed by the same bioweapon Mia was supposed to be guarding. The revelation does not give him answers. It just tells him that the woman he was trying to save was the reason he needed saving in the first place. Jill Valentine is the masked figure. Resident Evil 5 spends most of its runtime introducing a mysterious masked operative working alongside Albert Wesker. She moves with combat training nobody else in the field has. She fights you in coordinated set pieces with Wesker calling the shots, and she is rendered with just enough detail to make you sure you are supposed to recognize her under the mask, You spend the entire game waiting for the reveal, half suspecting the answer the whole time. Then Chris Redfield rips the mask off and it is Jill Valentine, his partner, his best friend, the woman everyone had assumed died at the end of the prior arc tied to Spencer's estate. Jill survived her fall. Wesker collected her body, he kept her preserved, then implanted her with a control device and reconditioned her into a personal bodyguard, weaponizing the closest person in Chris's life against him. The lore ripple here recontextualizes the entire space between Resident Evil 1 and 5. Jill has been alive this whole time, in Wesker's custody, being used as a research subject and a weapon. It also confirms how much further Wesker has drifted from anything human. He is not just running bioterrorism operations, he is mind-controlling Chris's best friend for sport. The control mechanism would later become a recurring piece of franchise tech, showing up in different forms across spin-off material and side games. The psychological shockwave is one of the few moments in the entire franchise where Chris audibly breaks. He spends the rest of the fight half fighting Jill, half pleading with her to come back, and the gameplay loop punishes you for hurting her. You are supposed to disable the control device on her chest, not kill her. It is the closest the series ever gets to making the player feel actively bad about pulling the trigger, and the resolution, when it finally comes, is more relief than victory. Spencer Mansion is just a front for an underground laboratory. For most of the first Resident Evil, the Spencer Mansion appears to be exactly what it advertises: a creepy gothic estate owned by a wealthy eccentric, somehow overrun by zombies and monsters because a virus got loose somewhere on the property. You spend hours solving puzzles built around suits of armor, antique paintings, a piano nobody is playing, and a dining room with a clock you absolutely have to interact with. The atmosphere is, old money goes wrong. Then you find the elevator, then another elevator, then a series of stairwells, then a hidden door behind a bookshelf, behind which is an industrial corridor that descends into a fully operational underground biological research laboratory. The mansion is not a haunted estate at all. It is a deliberately designed disguise, a Victorian skin draped over a massive corporate bioweapons facility, owned and operated by the Umbrella Corporation, where the zombies, hunters, and that one giant snake you fought in the attic were all engineered on site. The lore ripple from this single discovery is enormous in retrospect because it establishes the foundational pattern that defines the rest of the franchise. Every Resident Evil location that follows: the Raccoon City sewers, the Antarctic base, the African oil refinery, the Spanish village, the Louisiana plantation, the Romanian castle. Is the Spencer Mansion structure repeated? There is always a normal facade. There is always something monstrous engineered beneath it. The mansion is the prototype, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it anywhere else in the series. The shockwave at the time was less betrayal and more scale shift. You came in expecting a haunted house, and you exit with the dawning understanding that the haunted house was the lobby. Everything you thought was the entire game was actually the opening level, and the real horror was something a corporation built on purpose, on paper, with a budget line item. Albert Wesker is an Umbrella double agent. Captain Albert Wesker is supposed to be your boss. He is the leader of STAR's Alpha Team, your tactical commander, the man who sent you into the Arklay Mountains to investigate the disappearance of Bravo Team. He spends most of Resident Evil 1 conveniently absent during dangerous encounters and conveniently present whenever someone needs a calm voice telling the survivors what to do next. In hindsight, his uniform never gets dirty. The reveal lands in the laboratory beneath the mansion. Wesker is not a cop, he never was. He is a senior Umbrella researcher who engineered the entire mansion incident as a controlled live fire test, using STARS as expendable combat data, armed humans deployed against bioweapons in a sealed environment, with every encounter logged for product development. The people he sent to die were running quality assurance on Umbrella's products. He took the badge and the rank precisely so he could choose who walked into the meat grinder. The lore ripple from this twist is the entire shape of the franchise. Wesker becomes the through-line antagonist, who survives across multiple games, betrays Umbrella itself, joins shadow organizations, builds his own bioweapon empire, and eventually attempts global infection in Resident Evil 5. None of that exists if his RE1 reveal does not land. He is the first character to prove that the real threat in Resident Evil was never the monsters, it was the people who made them, dressed as the people who fight them. The psychological shockwave hits in the cutscene, where he is impaled by the tyrant he just unleashed on the survivors, dies dramatically, and is then revealed in later games to have injected himself with an experimental virus that resurrected him with superhuman speed, strength, and reflexes. The franchise basically used his fake death to upgrade him from villainous handler to near-immortal apex antagonist. Every Wesker scene from that point forward carries the weight of a man who got promoted by his own betrayal. Oswell E. Spencer is murdered by Wesker. For almost 10 real-world years and 3 full-game generations, Oswell E. Spencer exists as a name in files. He is the founder of Umbrella. He is the mansion's owner. He is the unseen architect behind every virus, every facility, every monster the series has thrown at you. The series treats him as a kind of remote god, old, sick, hidden in a private European estate, untouchable. Players have spent the entire franchise waiting to meet him. Resident Evil 5 finally puts him on screen for about 90 seconds before Wesker kills him. Wesker arrives at Spencer's manor demanding answers about Project W, the experimental program Spencer ran on a group of gifted children, of which Wesker himself was one. And Spencer, frail in his wheelchair, calmly explains that he had always intended to use his viruses to create a new species of godlike humans. Wesker, who is one of those engineered humans, decides that he is the god in question, and that Spencer is therefore obsolete. He impales him through the chest and walks out of the room. The lore ripple is structural. The death of Spencer ends the original Umbrella era completely. Every villain who came before Wesker now traces back to a man who can no longer answer for any of it. It also reframes Wesker's whole arc. He is not just a rogue researcher anymore, he is the surviving end product of Spencer's own ambitions, the experiment that outlived the experimenter. Project W becomes one of the most important pieces of franchise backstory, all unlocked by a single conversation. The shockwave of the moment is the quiet of it. Spencer barely resists. Wesker barely raises his voice. The man behind decades of horror dies in a 5-minute conversation in a dim study on a rainy night with no music swell and no boss fight. The most powerful figure in Resident Evil history exits like a deleted line of code. Eveline is the withered old woman. Resident Evil 7 keeps showing you a strange, blue-eyed little girl. Sometimes she appears in cutscenes. Sometimes she leaves drawings on the walls. Sometimes she just stands in the corner of a room and watches you. The Baker family talks about her as if she were a real child, and the framing of the game actively encourages you to read her as something like a ghost, a vengeful little girl spirit haunting the estate, possibly responsible for the Baker's madness. The reveal is that she is neither a ghost nor a little girl. Eveline is a bioweapon, designated E-01, a fully grown engineered being whose growth has been catastrophically accelerated. The little girl you keep seeing is a hallucination she projects into infected hosts as part of her psychological control mechanism, a stable form she chose for herself before her body started failing. Her actual physical form, the withered old woman you find strapped to a chair in the deepest part of the house, is what she really looks like at the end of her artificially compressed lifespan. The child was the costume. The dying old woman was the truth. The lore ripple reframes the entire family. The Bakers are not evil. They are infected, hallucinating Eveline as their adopted daughter, treating her as a child because the bioweapon has hijacked their perception. Jack, Marguerite, Lucas, all of them are victims of a single weaponized little girl-shaped delusion. The reveal also introduces the mold in the bioweapon E series, which becomes the entire engine of the next 2 mainline games and reshapes what a Resident Evil monster even is. The shockwave is the moment the camera pulls in on the figure in the chair and your brain reassembles every previous Eveline scene around the new information, every drawing on the wall, every shadow in the corner, every time she said, "Play with me." All of it was an old, dying engineered organism using a child's mask to seduce a family into loving her before her body finally gave out. Ethan Winters has been dead since Resident Evil 7. For all of Resident Evil 7 and most of Resident Evil Village, Ethan Winters is your regular guy protagonist. He gets hurt, he bleeds, he staples his own hand back on, he pours mysterious healing fluids on missing fingers and watches them reattach. The franchise frames all of this as Ethan is tough, or the healing items are very good, or this is just video game logic. Do not think about it too much. Resident Evil Village's final act asks you to think about it. Chris Redfield's intelligence files, combined with a quiet revelation from the Duke, confirm that Ethan was killed by Jack Baker at the start of Resident Evil 7, when he had his hand severed and his throat opened during the dinner table scene. The mold revived him, took over his cellular structure, and rebuilt him as a mold-based duplicate that retained his memories and personality. Every healing animation across 2 full games was mold reconstructing tissue. Every survival moment was a corpse refusing to stop. The lore ripple retroactively rewrites both Resident Evil 7 and Village. Ethan is not a survivor protagonist in the traditional sense. He is the first playable character in the franchise who is fundamentally a bioweapon himself, made of the same substance as the monsters he is fighting. It also reframes the BSAA's interest in him. In 7, he was a useful probe, a mold-compatible host walking unwittingly toward the source organism, and nobody told him because nobody needed him to know. The psychological shockwave belongs to Ethan, who has roughly 5 minutes between learning the truth about his own body and using that truth to defeat Mother Miranda. He gets to be a hero and a corpse at the same time. He says goodbye to his daughter. He dies on screen, finally, properly, after 2 games of postponed death. It is one of the only times the franchise has let an ending feel earned, because the protagonist had to die to make it. The Umbrella Corporation went bankrupt off-screen. The Umbrella Corporation is the spine of Resident Evil. It is the antagonist of the first 3 mainline games, the maker of every important virus, the employer of every important villain, and the engine of the entire franchise's plot. After Raccoon City gets nuked at the end of Resident Evil 3, you understandably expect the next big game to be about taking Umbrella down for good, exposing the conspiracy, dragging the executives in front of a tribunal, the whole catharsis. Resident Evil 4 opens with a text crawl that casually mentions Umbrella has already collapsed, off-screen, between games. The corporation that defined the entire series went bankrupt, and the legal and economic fallout of the Raccoon City disaster was dissolved by international tribunals and is essentially gone before the new game even begins. Leon, now a federal agent, is sent to rescue the president's daughter from a Spanish cult, and the entire Umbrella plot you spent 3 games building toward is handled in a sentence at the top of the credits. The lore ripple from this decision was the franchise's biggest pivot. Bioweapons stopped being one company's product and became a globalized black market. Tricell, The Connections, Neo Umbrella, the BSAA, and an entire ecosystem of post-Umbrella organizations rushed into the vacuum. The series broadened from fight one evil corporation to fight whatever organization caught the loose viruses this week. Without Umbrella's off-screen death, none of the modern Resident Evil shape exists. No Plagas, no mold, no Las Plagas-derived villages, no connections. The shockwave at the time was real fan whiplash. The series had spent years promising a confrontation, and Capcom decided the confrontation was less interesting than the aftermath. The reaction split players for years, but in retrospect, the move freed the franchise from a single recurring villain and forced it to grow up into a sprawling, decentralized, scarier world where the bad guys do not all share a logo. Mother Miranda orchestrated the entire history of Umbrella. Resident Evil Village introduces Mother Miranda as the regional antagonist, a powerful, mold-empowered woman ruling a small Romanian village, manipulating the 4 lords, kidnapping Ethan's daughter for a ritual to resurrect her own long-dead child. She is framed as one more local horror in a franchise full of them. Big villain, contained setting, personal stakes. Then her files reveal that she was Oswell E. Spencer's mentor. A century ago, young Oswell sat at Miranda's feet and listened to her preach about her godlike megamycete fungus, about the resurrection of the dead, about using biology to escape mortality. He took her ideas, sanitized them, industrialized them, and built the Umbrella Corporation on top of them. Every virus Umbrella ever produced, Progenitor, TG, all of it, traces back to research originally originally derived from Miranda's mold and her quiet century of experimentation in the Carpathian Mountains. The lore ripple is total. Umbrella did not invent Resident Evil's biology, Miranda did, and Spencer copied her homework. Every monster you have ever fought, every survivor you have ever played, every cutscene Wesker ever monologued in, all of it is downstream of a grieving mother in a Romanian village trying to bring her dead daughter back. The franchise's entire backstory was always her story. Everyone else was a footnote in it. Spencer, Wesker, Birkin, the entire bioweapons industrial complex, they are her students, twice removed. The shockwave of this twist is structural rather than emotional. It does not break any one character's world the way Ada's reveal broke Leon's, or the way Eveline's reveal broke the Bakers. It breaks the franchise's world. The villain of one game turns out to be the silent architect of every other game's existence, and you only learn this in optional documents you have to actively read. Capcom buried the biggest twist in the entire series in a side file, which is somehow the most Resident Evil decision they could have possibly made. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.